Zira said this: "Within the tiny vessel, the great cycle began anew." What cycle, and what does it mean for you? Well, today, the good news is that you are going to find out. Over the past 3 videos, we have been engaging with a conflict of cosmic proportions. In our first on Medivh, we established that the Prophet is aware of this cosmic war, and that he felt during Legion that all other conflicts paled in comparison. In our Cosmos video, we explored the battlefield of this conflict, the Great Game and its belligerents, the Light, Void, and the Burning Legion. In our Ethereals video, we found out that the Adventurers of Azeroth may well be the last bastion against this cosmic war, and that the Ethereals have taken great interest in our affairs. This week, though, we go bigger than ever. It is time to explore what is really at stake. What would happen if one side won the Great Game, and how this all relates to a grand cosmic cycle, one that is consistently teased about in lore, and also, I would say, think about Ragnarok in Norse mythology, and think about what happens afterwards. Essentially, yes, what happens when the universe ends, and how that is the driving force of Warcraft's wider storyline. And speaking of going wider, do you want to use the internet worldwide and not be stuck with region-locked content? Well, with today's sponsor, NordVPN, you can, and you'll get 70% off at $349 a month and your first month free. Why get a VPN? It's simple. Do you want to watch content from another region, maybe in Netflix or something else? Bam! Use Nord's 5,000 plus servers to choose your location and use the internet as if you were in that location. So if there's that show and that service that's only available in, say, the UK, you can do it. There's other reasons as well. With a VPN, your ISP won't know what sites you're using, so they can't sell your browsing data to advertisers, nor can they prioritize some of the sites that you use. You see, what a VPN does is it tunnels your traffic through their servers, encrypts the whole thing, and it means that it's extremely secure and private. And because Nord are a Panama-registered company, your government can't get through them to breach your privacy. It's all super easy to use through their app and their browser extension, and you can get 70% off and a free month at nordvpn.com/Bellular Gaming. So, thank you to them for supporting our content, and with that, let's get going. Before we get stuck into the idea of Warcraft having this cyclical universe, I think it would be good to first just address a few things. Now, yeah, cyclical universes are pretty darn common in sci-fi and fantasy. I mean, hell, just look at StarCraft 2, especially Legacy of the Void. If you talk about, the universe, right, in a bit of media, inevitably questions come up about what came before it. These conversations often then spiral out of control, and then suddenly it's just elephants all the way down, and it's insanity. It's much easier to think about a cyclical, bounded universe than trying to imagine literal nothingness, infinity. It is essentially taking an infinite line, but then connecting its two ends to make a circle. It's much tidier in the mind's eye, and something that many beings in the Warcraft universe have actually talked about. So with that, let us begin. When Dor said, "Without the void, the light cannot exist," she was hinting at a greater fundamental truth of the universe, that much like the Naru, who have their cycle, the cosmos itself has an eternal cycle between light and void domination. And we have literal proof. Chronicle states that our current cycle of the universe began with all being light, and that then the void coalesced within that light, leading to World of Warcraft's Big Bang. Overall, the Void gained the upper hand on light in this cycle, but this cycle actually has something different. The Burning Legion, a third party that changed the rules of the game. So with that, let's get into the evidence. A cyclical cosmos is a big claim, I get that, but there is substantial evidence. The first and most direct evidence comes from Zira. She claimed that Illidan's destiny was cast out on the cosmic winds, and within the tiny vessel, the great cycle began anew. Now, it's noteworthy here that the cycle is in reference to the Child of Light and Shadow prophecy. This shows us that, in Zira's view, Illidan would be the catalyst for light found victory in the great game. I believe we can infer that in the past, the Child of Shadow and Light would have played out that role as she would have expected. This time, though, there's something different. The Legion. Order brought to disorder through the Dark Titan Sargeras that changed everything. Illidan, through them, injected with the Fel, he rejected that destiny. He rejected the cycle. The light has been shown to be extremely dogmatic, with a singular vision of the future. If that vision is in danger, it will aggressively do whatever it takes, and free will is no obstacle, unless you have I-beam available. Now, there is evidence of the cycle from the polar opposite, from the Void, though we're going to get there first through a Legion pawn. In the Cathedral of Eternal Night, Argonaut said, "My end was written in the rings." Now, this could be taken as a tree reference, obviously, but the way that he stated the rings could be pointing to something greater. This is taken further with Il'gynoth, and not even mentioning his more recent appearances in 8.3. Back when he was a tree, he said, "Your coming was foretold in the rings." Again, the rings. He continues, "The long cycle is nearly complete." Now, this is curious. It is both Argonaut and Il'gynoth being confident of their own death, but that their death is also like a necessity, a part of a long cycle that they can predict. And I feel this is reflected in our Void enemies, the ones we've encountered. They always have this smug sense of assurance, of eventual victory. You see that in 8.3. Perhaps then, the Void feels it's on the verge of domination, and when you think about it, with the Titans and Sargeras gone, and light seemingly being on the ropes in our universe, there is enough evidence to point towards a Void-dominated universe being very likely. And yes, you may say that we just defeated N'Zoth, but I would say, A, you'd be a fool to think that N'Zoth did not achieve something through our trip to Ny'alotha, as is the norm from him, and B, the developers have pretty much said as much. Steve Denuser heavily teased when he was answering a question about what happens to the old god's essence once they are defeated. Where does it go? Will we see them again in a new form? Basically, yes. When considering what Steve said, you've got to remember this. N'Zoth was not defeated in a Titan prison, unlike the other old gods. He was free, and in his own realm when he was defeated. Il'gynoth clearly knew that N'Zoth would be defeated, as evidenced by his voice lines. So, yes, if we step back, almost all life in the universe has been scourged. The Titans are gone. Azeroth is alone in the dark. So what made this cycle different? To explain that, let's bring in the third belligerent, Sargeras. He has been waging his burning crusade against life itself. He did this to deny Void the corruptible life that it needs to dominate the universe. Now, this brings up several questions. If light is the antithesis to Void, then why would the light pursue a 1,000-year war against the Burning Legion? Well, let's start with Sargeras himself. He was told by the Nathrezim that the Void Lords existed, that the Void Lords lived outside our universe, and that they were trying to manifest themselves in the great dark beyond, and the implications of them doing so. Although this threat seemed existential, so too must the demons of the Twisting Nether whenever Sargeras first encountered them and took up his initial charge. Would he not then, as a first reaction, attempt to contain or eradicate the Void through less extreme means than destroying literally all life? It strikes me that Sargeras was told a more fundamental truth about the universe, that perhaps it was cyclical, of this great light and void game, and that the one thing he was assured of, his perpetuity, was at risk. That indeed, the light itself could be as much a risk as the void. And with that knowledge, he used his demons to start the Burning Crusade, to wipe the universe clean of all life, to deny the void its fuel, but also to destroy the forces of the light. Just think about what we know right now, that before our universe was born, there was only light. That literally suggests that in the previous cycle, the cycle that everyone's mentioning in the big lore, that light was dominant and consumed all of existence. So, in preventing either side from winning, Sargeras' perpetuity would be guaranteed through the eternal balance of a stagnant, cold, dead universe. Even without Sargeras knowing the ultimate stakes of the cosmos and the cycle bit, his actions, the eradication of all life, would meet the same end, that cold, dead balance, the stagnation of a dead universe. This is ultimately why the light as well wars with the Burning Legion. So, with that, let's talk about the Titan plan. To do that, we shall begin with Xal'atath, who is privy to extreme knowledge, with her potentially even being a lost fifth Azerothian old god, as has been teased. She said that the Naaru are long-lost brethren to her, and she asked, do the Naaru speak of the eternal conflict, that the entire history of your world is but a fraction of the time that has passed? And what she's essentially referencing there is deep time. It could also be a reference to the cosmic cycle. She said eternal conflict. That means infinite, and we now pretty much know there's a cycle, or at least there's a cycle that just about everyone has been talking about when you get to the greatest light and void characters in this universe. And when we talk about eternity and infinity, time obviously comes up, and it seems here that time and causality are both incredibly important to how all of this bears out. And that brings us to Aman'Thul, the Titan of Time, someone who would clearly know about this cycle. When he empowered Nozdormu, he said, "Unto you is charged the great task of keeping the purity of time. Know that there is only one true timeline, though there are those who would have it otherwise." We can now say with certainty that the true timeline is really just the one that suits the Titan's plans, right? And being a little bit meta for a second, now that we know that technically Chronicle is a Titan account of history, I think, yeah, it's even more suggested that that pure timeline that they are trying to preserve is kind of the one that they think is the pure and true timeline. Then too, when you think about the infinite dragons who have tried to corrupt that timeline and their void-ish origins, when you really dive into their lore, I think it once again ties into this great struggle between the powers. Going back to the empowerment of Nozdormu, Aman'Thul continued to him, saying, "Without the truth of time as it is meant to unfold, more will be lost than you can possibly imagine. The fabric of reality will unravel." That's what's at stake, the fabric of reality itself. If this timeline is affected, then yes, the Titan's plan could go way off course. So, what is this Titan ambition? Well, this is a bit that is just literally pure speculation. First, I think we can assume their true timeline is one that leads to the awakening of the Azerothian world's soul. The Dragonflights were empowered, for that purpose, and Nozdormu was charged with protecting the causality of that plan. Regardless of her purpose, if this timeline is set off course, and if she is not awakened according to the Titan's plans, it, according to them, could impact the fabric of reality itself, which is a pretty major thing to have at stake. With that said, it is time for Silvanus. That might seem confusing, but we're going to tie it in, just wait. Silvanus' ambitions in Shadowlands are not yet fully known. Recent novel snippets do point towards her trying to reignite a faction war, with Gen being hot-headed, and her plan to have Bumsamdi be killed. From all of this, we can take that she's been stockpiling souls, of course, in the Maw, because that's where they go. The only other thing pointing to her ultimate ambition is the Shadowlands reveal trailer, in that she claims that Azeroth is a prison. Now that's odd, because the Shadowlands in its own way is a prison. Even the more idyllic places like Bastion are a little bit dark when you think about them. Now, she has allied herself with somebody in a similarly unenviable position, the Jailer, someone who is likely bound to the Maw, well, pretty much for the rest of time, or perhaps just the rest of this cycle. What if Silvanus and the Jailer, two characters who have literally no hope of redemption or peace, even in death, see the only way out of their situation being to force this final conflict, turning the cycle and perhaps the destruction of parts of the universe as we know it? There is something else to talk about here, but to fully talk about it would involve a leak from Shadowlands, one that reveals the Jailer's full appearance and who he bears a striking resemblance to. And I may cover that leak in the future, but for now, let us just say that his associations that we can extrapolate from how he looks tie into a prior segment of this video and somewhat could help to bring things together and to bring the Jailer's ultimate ambitions in line with this great game and this cosmic cycle. Ultimately, though, the true lore there is Shadowlands' story to tell, and that is something that I want to do when it's available officially and not via semi-clandestine means. Okay, with that, let's bring everything together. Before our cycle started, there was only pure light. This is a confirmed fact via Chronicle. However, there can't be shadow without light, and there can't be light without shadow. Therefore, shadow, aka void, coalesced. Fast forward, and the forces of light and void once again were vying for dominance in this cycle. This time, void had the upper hand, and then Sargeras' burning legion wreaked havoc on the balance between the two. With both sides talking about the Great Cycle, and circular imagery being everywhere, it's not subtle what we're talking about here. And furthermore, let us just look at Blizzard's inspirations: Lovecraftian cosmic horror, and in great part, Norse mythology. Norse mythology is full of circular imagery and a cycle of death and rebirth, much like World of Warcraft's universe. After Ragnarok, the end of days, what happens in Norse mythology? The world is born anew. A new cycle begins. From what all we've researched, I think WoW's story is clear. It's a story of self-determination, of free peoples, of breaking free of destiny, being our own heroes, and forging our own paths. We are not slaves, not to the void, and not to the light. If void wins, all our minds are taken by madness. Azeroth will be corrupted, and she will usher in the void lords from outside of the universe. All will be void, just like how by the end of the last cycle, all was light. And if light wins, all will be remade in it, just as Zira and her Naru have said. Should that happen, we will lose what makes us good people, just as Yrel turned from a virtuous freedom fighter to zealotry, torture, and merciless brutality in AU Draenor. The story of WoW is about forging our own path and rejecting this cycle. Not by destroying all life as Sargeras would, but by maintaining balance, freedom, and harmony, perhaps as the Pandarans would. With StarCraft, the free peoples of the universe fought against the very same thing, against a cycle-breaking tyrant. And I think the same thing is going to be happening in World of Warcraft. And to tease some future content that I think we're going to be making, you know, Illidan and Sargeras are going to be spending a lot of time with each other. And I imagine they're going to be having a pretty darn deep chat about all the things that Sargeras knows. And when those characters return to the lore, I think we're going to learn a lot. And I think the people who will have clicked in this video and thought, nah, you guys have just done acid, and you're just doing a bunch of BS just to get another video out of nowhere, well, I think they're going to be eating their own words, I'll say that much. So there you go. I hope you enjoyed this video. It was a bit more far out. We loved making it, and hopefully all of this cosmic talk has made Steve Denuser weak at the knees, as it seems to do to us. If you want more of the supporting material for this video, and if you haven't, you really should watch them, then watch our 3 previous lore videos. They are on Medivh, which really sparks this off, on the Cosmos, and on the Ethereals. I think you'll enjoy them a lot. So thank you, have a wonderful day, and I will see you next time.